Hi everybody, this is Kathy Drew and my friend Jamie, and we're here at Gina's Bernina Sewing Center today. So we're in the store, so you may hear a lot of noise and action in the background, don't you think?
Yeah.
We got customers all over the place today. So Jamie and I want to talk to you a little bit about doing edge finishes on different types of fabric with Bernina's number 2 or 2A presser foot. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I think it'll
That's
be cool.
going to be wonderful.
We're going to sew on knit.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and we're going to sew on some wovens
Oh,
too,
wow.
a little bit heavier. So it'll help those of you that don't have a serger. This is the way we always did it before we had sergers for the home sewers.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's going to be cool.
It's gonna be
And
fun.
we will be right back after we get the cameras set up for you, okay?
See ya.
All right. Okay, so Jamie, did you know there's two different presser feet number 2? We have 2A, which is what I'm going to be using today, and 2. Now the difference in the 2 of these presser feet is that if there's no letter on the presser foot, then it's made for a 5.5 millimeter sewing machine.
That is great information.
Okay, and if you have a letter, like this one has 2A on it, this is for our 9 millimeter machine. So we're sewing on the fabulous 790 plus today, so we're going to be using 2A. Now presser foot 2A is called the Overlock Foot. And this is the presser foot that we always use because I'm old enough to remember when we didn't have sergers that we could use at home. So this is a presser foot that we always use. And what's really cool about this foot, of course, it only has one toe, kind of looks like a zipper foot, doesn't it?
It does.
And then when you look at the bottom, I don't know.
Wow.
Yo, okay.
Yeah, you can see
Can you
that.
see that tiny little pin right there?
Yes.
Let me get that stylus and get my fat finger out of their way. But you can see that tiny little pin that runs right through there. He has a job to do for us. And what he is going to do is put slack in the needle thread so that when you sew off the edge of your fabric, it won't curl that fabric under. It'll keep it nice and flat, okay? It's also where we're going to guide the edge of the fabric. So when we position our fabric under the presser foot, because we want to sew off the edge, we will be putting the edge of that fabric directly under that little pin. We don't want it to extend past, and we don't want to be able to see a shallow area in that opening. We want the right swing of our needle to fall right off the edge of that fabric, okay? Now with this presser foot, you can use various widths with it. And so that's purely adjustable. And on those machines where you go into the machine and tell it what presser foot you've put on, it will make sure that you don't choose a stitch at a width or in a needle position area that the needle would hit that little pin in the foot. So a lot of people don't know about this foot. It used to always come with their machines, but a lot of people don't know about it. So there is a way to get your needle thread under the foot. I'm a real stickler about doing that. So where that little pin is, I take my finger and hold that needle thread down and then pull back, and it will snap right under because that pin is not attached toward the back because our thread has to feed off of it. So it's just going to go right through there.
That is amazing.
I always like to have my needle thread where I know where it is, and especially on a knit. Okay, now normally when I sew on a knit, you want to be very careful when you start at the beginning. People are always concerned about their beginning area of the knit falling down into the throat plate cover. So we want to be very careful about that. I would cut my pieces a little bit longer so I could start in from that edge and not have to worry about it, but we're going to see what we can do. We're going to use stitch number 3, and if you look that stitch up in your manual, and that's in our practical sewing screen, it is called the overlock stitch. And it is comprised of 3 straight stitches and 1 zigzag. Now that zigzag is going to fall off the edge, and the straight stitches are going to be within the fabric. So those straight stitches are going to seam it together, and the zigzag is going to create an overlock for it. Okay, I'm going to use my press foot button to lower so that the foot will lift a little for me, and then that way I can make sure that I have the edge of my fabric directly underneath that pin on the presser foot. Did all that make sense?
It made perfect sense.
Let me pop that out there again, and my presser foot down, and then lift and reposition that fabric. And I think about 5.5 is the maximum we can go on that one. So there's our straight stitches. And then I'm going to sew slow just at the beginning. 3 straight stitches and a zigzag to the right. And the right swing of the needle is falling off the edge of the knit. And this is a very soft Sea Island cotton knit. It feels wonderful. But this would be a way for you to be able to sew on knit if you don't own a serger.
It's sewing beautiful.
Oh, I know it does. And look at the little edge. It creates kind of like a little picot edge.
And you could use that for a decorative stitch as well.
You certainly can. I love how quiet the machine is. Another thing I always do when I'm sewing on knits, because our machines have the ability, of course, to tie off and secure, I turn that off so that when it takes those securing stitches at the very beginning, it's not going to knock that knit down into the fabric. So I just hold on to my threads when I first start, and so I know where they are. And look how beautiful that is. Isn't that pretty?
Gorgeous.
And that's your overlock. Now we have a lot of different stitches that we can use. These are fully adjustable. If you want your stitches closer together, of course, you can adjust your stitch length to do that. And that is how you can seam up a knit, because you want a stitch that's going to allow the knit to stretch. Because if the knit can't stretch, then the threads are going to break. Okay? And you would use just normal garment construction weight thread in whatever size needle. So we've got on an 80 universal because we're working on a knit. We don't want to use, we want to use something that has a slight ballpoint to it. I didn't go with a full ballpoint needle on this simply because of how fine this knit is, it being the Sea Island cotton, and a universal is plenty for that to protect that inner lot. And you want to use a universal or a ballpoint on a knit because that rounded tip will push the fiber, the interlock stitches out of its way rather than pierce through them.
So you wouldn't use a jersey or a stretch?
A jersey is a stretch needle.
Okay.
But I keep universals on hand at home. A universal needle is not a true sharp tip needle. It's not a true ballpoint. It's something in between, so it kind of will get you by in a pinch.
Oh, that's
and
good.
It's perfect for the lighter weight, finer knits, you know. All right, now we're going to pretend that this is a neckband.
I like pretending.
Okay, a neckband or a neck hole rather on something, or just a curve, whatever you need to imagine this to be. But I have cut just a piece of the same knit fabric, and you'll notice that I did cut it to where the length of the piece that we're going to attach around the hole is on the greatest amount of stretch of this knit. And we've simply folded it, wrong sides together, and with this knit it's so beautiful you're not going to be able to tell the right and the wrong side. And you would follow your pattern, of course. Now, whenever I was making knit clothes for myself, you know, the pattern will tell you to divide it up in quarters and pin it in the center back and the center front, and then quarter it and pin on the shoulders. And I never did that because most of the time your neck hole in the front is deeper than the neck hole part in the back. So I always took about 1 inch more on each side and gave it down to the front of the shirt. Does that make any sense? You know. Otherwise, it kind of wants to pull it up. So we're just going to position this on. And of course, if you were following a pattern, your neckband is going to be a little bit smaller than your neck hole, and you would have to stretch. But we're not going to worry about that. We're just showing the techniques. There again, all those edges are going to go underneath that pin, and take yourself just a few stitches to get started. And then once you've done that, remember, this is not something that you have to sew shaping it in a curve. All you have to do is straighten it out and continue on. Here we go. So we're going to straighten that edge out and just continue stitching. Want to make sure we keep those edges even on top of each other and underneath that pin. We don't want it to extend off to the right. We want that stitch to fall right off the edge. Okay, let's lift it up and check it out. And we have attached a pretty little neckband.
And that is perfect.
Isn't it perfect?
And it lays perfectly
And
flat.
you didn't have to have ribbing. You just made it out of the same fabric, the same knit that you made the shirt out of. Cool, huh?
Yes, that's perfect.
Now, there's lots of different ways that you can put a hem in knit, but if you want something a little decorative with that number 3 stitch, and we've used this a lot. You could also use a zigzag stitch, but I like the number 3. I am going to fold up just about 1 inch, so you want to allow for that on whatever you're doing. And we are going to sew this number 3 stitch. Once again, we're going to put that fold that we created underneath the guide of the foot or the pin. And notice I've got the right side of the, if this were a garment or a blanket or whatever, this is the right side, what we're looking at, because your prettiest stitch always comes from the needle. And we're going to just put this stitch, and then that excess fabric that I folded up, we can just trim it off close to the stitching on the back, because a knit doesn't fray. And I made a bunch of little baby blankets for Jacob, my daughter, when she had Jacob. And this is kind of the little edge. So I'm going to flip this over. And I'm just going to take my scissors.
And go close
And
to
you're
it.
just going to go close to that stitch. I'm going to get my hand in the way here. There we go.
Now you can see.
Okay. And then you just trim that off close to the stitching.
Oh, wow.
And you don't have to worry about it fraying because it's a knit. Isn't that
is
cool?
amazing.
Now, another thing that happens to people, because you don't have to just use this presser foot on knit, you can also use it on your woven fabric. So I've got a couple of pieces right here. And we're going to pick another stitch. Let's see, which one do we want to use? Let's go over and let's try stitch number 19. Okay? Now, when we first use this stitch, it's going to be sewing at a stitch width of 5.5. There again, I'm going to put the edges of the fabric under the pin of the foot. You know what? I'm going to, bear with me guys, I'm going to lean this camera over a little bit. I want y'all to be able to see. Can you see the edge of the fabric right here? It's pretty bright, and there's that little pin. So we're going to keep that edge right under the pin of the foot. I'm going to set that down gently. And we're going to start our stitching. And let's see how it does. Do you notice anything weird about it?
Well, it's pinching in some.
Yeah, it's pinching in a little bit, isn't it?
Yes.
You're getting kind of like, and I've got a piece right here so that you can look at.
Yes.
You're getting a little bit of tunneling in your stitching.
And you don't want that.
No, you don't want that because you want your seams to lay nice and flat. So all this is telling me is that for this weight of fabric, the stitch width that I'm using is way too wide. So we're going to decrease that width down. It's on 5.5. Let's take it down to 4.5 and see how it does. So you always want to do an experiment.
Do a test sew first.
A test run on the fabric. Looking any better?
Oh, it looks
A little
good to me.
bit.
Yeah.
No, let's go just a little bit more down to 4. And I think that that is probably going to be perfect. If not, we'll go down to 3.5. Is that looking any better?
Yes, it's laying perfectly
Laying
flat.
perfectly flat. So keep that in mind anytime you're working with any stitch that has width on it. Now, if it were a decorative stitch, of course, you could just use, and I've got another sample right here we can look at too. If it was a decorative stitch, you could just use some stabilizer because you might want to keep that really wide width on that stitch. But we don't necessarily want to put a stabilizer on a garment or something that we're going to be wearing. So in that case, you're just going to adjust the width of your stitch to where it's more acceptable to the weight of fabric you're working on, and you'll have a nice flat seam.
That's going to be perfect.
Pretty cool, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Just those tiny little things that we can do to our stitches to make them work perfectly for whatever the project is that we're working on. I've got one more sample of fabric that we're going to work with if I can get these threads cut. I've got so many things going on. We've got some pretty heavy fabric here.
I love that heavy fabric.
Oh no, this might be good like for draperies and things like that. And so there again, we're going to choose a stitch that has a straight stitch incorporated in the left part of the stitch, almost like a seaming stitch. The one I'm using is stitch number 20. Okey-doke. And if you want to, because this is really going to ravel on you, see how these threads are coming up a little loose here? You can decrease the length of that stitch and bring those stitches really close together, and it will control a lot of that. Let's widen that stitch up too. I've got it all the way up to the maximum width. And let's see how that looks, because we want to control all that fraying off the edge. How's that looking, Jamie, on
It
the
looks
back?
good. You're not getting any puckering or anything.
Good. Is it controlling the fray?
Oh yes, it's pulling it in nice and taut.
Looks good, doesn't it?
Yes.
And that's a very secure stitch. So for draperies or home deck, this would be a perfect stitch to use. And there again, don't be afraid to adjust the stitch to whatever you need it to be to get the job done for you. Take a look. See?
Oh, that is perfect.
That looks really good, doesn't it?
Yes, it's
And
pulled
it's going
all
to
those
secure.
in.
It does. It's a great stitch. So that was stitch number 20 in your practical sewing screen, which is the first screen that comes up on your Bernina.
Wow.
What do you think?
I think that's going to be awesome.
I
And you
think
can
it
make
would
a
too.
really nice purse with that.
You can.
Yes.
And a lot of people don't have sergers, so this will get them passed. So check with your Bernina dealer in your area. If this is a foot that you think you might want to have in your collection, check with your local Bernina dealer. And as always, we want you all to follow us, share, be sure and subscribe so you can catch all our videos. And look for us on Facebook too. We have a Facebook page, and every day we do a live video in the shop talking about everything. What'd you talk about this morning?
We talked about needles. We talked about smets and serger and embroidery needles and
All those
pleating
things.
needles.
Everything.
Yes.
Hand sewing needles.
Yes,
So
all the
Jamie
things.
loves to work with wool, so she knows all about the hand sewing needles, and so we try to cover stuff and show what's new in the shop. And so we want y'all to join us on Facebook too.
Yeah.
Facebook Live, you'll get to meet all the girls that work here.
Yep. Come in and see us.
That's right. And if you need anything, you can reach us at info@ginasbernina.com, or you can visit our website at www.ginasbernina.com. Of course, we don't put any of the Bernina accessories on the website, but anything we can help you with, we're glad to do it. Give the girls a call at 865-966-5941. Ask for Jamie.
You can. I
All
wouldn't mind a
right.
bit.
Hey, we've had fun. Thank you all so much for being with us today, and we'll see you again really soon. We're going to keep adding these videos, as many as we can, aren't we?
Yes, and we're going to have fun at it.
Yeah, Jamie and I are going to make a blouse in one of them.
Oh,
so
that's going to be
y'all
fabulous.
take care now. We'll see you
See
soon.
ya.
Bye-bye.